Infinix just launched the Infinix Note 8. Now, I've already talked about how Infinix will not lose, even though the pricing of this phone is higher than that of the competition, because of their already established dominance in other areas of the market. So now I want to talk about the Infinix 08, but then not the Infinix 08, but instead the Infinix 08i, because I actually feel that is the phone that people should actually look into. It's much of a better buy for me, in my opinion. So what are the key specs of that phone? It has a 6.78-inch 20.5:9 aspect ratio 720p screen. It has a MediaTek Helio G80. It has a 48 megapixel main camera and an 8 megapixel selfie camera. It has a configuration of 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage. And it has a 5200 mAh battery that supports 18 watts fast charging. Alright, these specs look pretty good, so let's break them down. Now, I want to start with the performance. First of all, a round of applause to Infinix for actually sticking to their guns and giving us a good phone with a good processor instead of the redundant P22s that we've been getting for the longest time. So I'm very happy about this. The MediaTek Helio G80 is a absolute beast, at least for the price point that this phone is going to come in. And now you couple that with 6 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage running Android 10, and you have my money. Like, the phone is perfect. It's like your dream phone when it comes to what you would want on paper for a certain price point. Now, I do have some problems with the phone though, mainly being the display. Now, it's 6.78 inches and it's a 20.5:9 aspect ratio screen, which is not bad considering the fact that I like big phones. So 6.75 inches isn't much. But my problem comes in the aspect ratio. 20.5:9 feels a little bit too narrow, at least in my opinion, because I myself have complained about 21:9 aspect ratio, and now you bring 20.5:9. It's just like 0.5 more to make 21:9, which means it's very thin, it's very narrow, and I don't know how comfortable it would be to actually use it day to day, at least for someone like me who likes sort of bigger phones. But it's just a minor nitpick from me. And it also has the 5200 mAh battery with 18 watt support through the USB Type-C port. Another round of applause for Infinix. Like, they finally cleaned up the clutter that they've been giving us, the trash that they've been giving us in the name of phones for the past almost 2 years now. So why exactly am I saying go for this phone? Like, why should you pick the 8i, which is basically the 8 Lite, over the 8? Well, let me give you the specs of the 8 itself so you see the difference. Now, the 8 has a 6.95-inch 720p 20.5:9 aspect ratio screen. It has the same MediaTek Helio G80. It has a 64 megapixel main camera and a 16 megapixel selfie camera. It has a configuration of 6x128. Also has a 5200 mAh battery that supports 18 watts fast charging through the USB Type-C port. Now, you've heard all of these specs and you can tell that there's absolutely no difference between these two phones except the cameras. And that's because that's the point. Basically, the Infinix Note 8 is supposed to be for people who care more about cameras, like camera specs. But then in the end, it's not about camera specs. It's about the performance, at least when it comes to Android phones. So my reasoning for telling people not to go for the Infinix Note 8 is very simple. There is no need right now for a 64 megapixel camera. Say for instance, Infinix wanted to go overboard and add 8K video recording. 8K is just 33 megapixels per frame. So that means a 48 megapixel lens is fine for it. Like, That's why it doesn't even make sense to me when they say that Samsung added 108 megapixels to their S20 Ultra, because 108 megapixels is way overboard for what you need to record 8K. Now, another thing any keen-eyed person will notice is that I did not talk about the other cameras that this phone has. That's because to me, these two phones have only one main camera. In fact, they have only one camera in general. Now, I say they have only one camera in general because, like, Infinix WTF is a 2 megapixel macro camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensor, and a 2 megapixel AI lens. Infinix, come on, seriously. Like, it doesn't even make sense. And to me, those are the most useless bunch of cameras to have in a phone. 2 megapixel depth sensor, what the hell is that supposed to be doing for anyone? It doesn't make sense. So to me, these phones have only one camera, which is the 48 megapixel on the 8i and the 64 megapixel on the 8. So why should you actually consider these phones? Now, I've already pointed out the main things, the things that make these phones good in the screen size, the very good processor, the great on-paper specs, the final addition of USB Type-C, which means that we'll finally start seeing USB Type-C chargers and cables drop in price in Nigeria because it's now becoming more common, and that's great for the consumers. I didn't want to compare these phones to another phone, but just for reference sake, the Xiaomi Redmi 9, which I feel this phone is targeting, comes with a 6.53-inch IPS LCD screen with a 19.5:9 aspect ratio screen. It's a 1080p screen as opposed to the 720p that we're still stuck with on the Note 8 and Note 8i. It has two useful cameras as opposed to one on the other phones. It has a 13 megapixel main camera and an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera. I could technically also say it has three useful cameras because the macro camera is a 5 megapixel camera, which is much better than 2 megapixels that we've been seeing from a lot of manufacturers these days. And it also has a 5020 milliamp hour battery. All good and fine. So now this phone is cheaper, one. But then I want to bring your attention to something, because now that I've said that this phone is cheaper, some people may say it's better to go for this phone. The base variant of this phone, the Xiaomi Redmi 9, starts at 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of internal storage. If we're going to compare it with the highest end variant, which is 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage, the price would have gone up by quite a lot. So it now makes this Note 8 and Note 8i a better buy. And I actually don't think that anyone in 2020 should get a phone that has 3 gigs of RAM and it's running Android 10. That is absolutely stupid to me. So my final thoughts on the Infinix Note 8 and 8i is they're both good phones, 100% worth it, but I don't think you should get the Note 8. Get the Note 8i because everything you're getting on the regular Note 8, you're still getting on the 8i, and you're not skipping out on anything except just a few megapixels on your camera shots, and you actually will not miss it at all. Well, those are just some quick thoughts on the phones from me. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.